call to order the virtual city council meeting, Lakewood City Council meeting in Lakewood, Colorado on August 10th, 2020. The clerk, please call the roll.
Paul?
Here.
Able?
Here.
Vincent?
Here.
Gutwein?
Here.
Vita?
Here.
Skilling?
Here.
Springsteen?
Here.
Franks?
Here.
Johnson?
I'm here.
LaBure?
Here.
Harrison?
Here.
You have a quorum.
Fantastic. Well, I'd like to welcome everybody who is tuning in this evening or checking in at a later date. We will have a couple opportunities for public comment. One is general public comment, and then the consent agenda, as well as individual resolutions and second reading ordinances. The phone number for public comment tonight is 646-558-8656. And the webinar ID is 956-8471-7277. You'll press *9 to request your opportunity to speak. Let me back up there though. Once you enter the webinar, please press pound and then you'll press *9. And again, we'll have a couple different opportunities. 2 housekeeping notes. We have a general business motion, which is the motion to extend the emergency declaration, as well as a mention in the agenda revised, as well as an email that went to council about a continuance on, I believe that would be resolution 2020-23, which is authorizing allocations for 533 Van Gordon. And that would be a request to extend that to, or continue that to August 24th, 2020. So again, thank you all. And if you would please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, and we'll have a moment of silent prayer. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. So this is general public comment now. This is the point in the meeting where the public is invited to address the city council on items that did not appear on the agenda. All comments should be directed to the city council. I ask all persons calling in to observe the same decorum that we would have at a regular city council meetings. Again, to participate in general public comment or your other opportunities tonight, please dial 646-558-8656. Webinar ID will be 956-8471-7277. You'll press pound after entering and then *9 if this is when you would like to speak. And again, there'll be other opportunities that will follow the agenda tonight under consent, as well as resolutions and second reading ordinances. So Madam Clerk, if you would please.
Mayor Paul, there's no one with their hand raised at this time.
Okay. So we'll wait a couple seconds here. Again, if you would like to speak, you'll have 3 minutes, and I'll have a timer here. I'll give you a 30-second warning and then ask you to wrap it up when your time has expired. And we'll just kind of give it a couple more seconds here. Anybody, Ms. Millard?
There is not.
Okay. I will now close public comment and we will move into Ms. Hodson's executive report.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. A couple of updates for you. First of all, the second round of the COVID Nonprofit Impact Grant. Remember, the first round already was allocated and was distributed. You had asked, City Council had asked that we budget for a second round. to the tune of $375,000. We did so, and we included that into our request for CARES dollars. So you will see that second round by resolution on August 24th. So if you would like that to be approved, you'll see that on your agenda for August 24th. It's the same rules and the same process. I believe we have Mayor Pro Tem Skilling, who is a representative with the citizen group who helps make those recommendations. So you will see that again on the agenda on August 24th. The mayor just mentioned the continuation of the 40+ allocation request. So you'll see that later. That was due to an incomplete notification process. We're actually alerted by a citizen, and we're actually grateful for that. But because of that, the notification process wasn't complete, and we're going to need to continue that to make sure that we've covered all of the requirements for our notification process. And that again is on 533 Van Gordon. I want to give you some updates as it relates to our community resources facilities. They're working diligently with the health department to make sure that we're working within the most current health order, but also doing what we can to open the facilities for the enjoyment and participation of the Lakewood community. So I'll go down the latest list of openings. The Heritage Lakewood Belmar Park Visitor Center is open by reservation. It's easy to make a reservation. Please do so. The center is open Tuesday through Saturdays from 10 to 3. So for more information, just go to the website, lakewood.org/heritage. We're also expanding the hours at Carmody Recreation Center starting tonight or today, August 10th. That's good news. We have so many folks who love the Carmody Recreation Center. The center's splash pad and outdoor pool will remain open through September 27th. Again, unless there are changes to the public health orders, we're monitoring those orders and the most current order on a daily basis. Surfside Spray Park has been successful. The kids have really enjoyed that particular facility. That will remain open through September 20th. We're going to start private facility rentals at Clements Community Center on evenings and weekends. And finally, I guess I get to announce this. After a whole year of working on this, Community Resources is pleased to announce the new Lakewood Trail Explorer, which is an interactive trail map. That we get requests for trail maps on a just a continual basis. And this one is a result of a partnership with our GIS team to map each of the trails in the city system. And it provides an application that is mobile friendly and illustrates trail attributes and what those uses are allowed on the trails. So go to lakewood.org/trails. And did you know that we have nearly 240 miles of trails just in the city of Lakewood? So that's going to be a feature that I think a lot of the citizens will really enjoy. Now, some highlights on city clerk's office. They have been working diligently on reviewing the sufficiency of petitions related to the retail marijuana citizen initiative. The determination of sufficiency is due on August 13th. So poor Michelle and her staff have been working really hard to verify, validate the signatures. And the final determination is due to you, City Council, on August 23rd. And so then it gets placed on the council agenda as a citizen-initiated ordinance, retail marijuana, again on August 24th. There's a lot happening on August 24th, so you'll want to take a nap before that meeting and also get ready for an action-packed evening. There's going to be a lot of things on that agenda. And I just want to thank the city clerk's office for working so hard on making sure that that the signatures are all legit, et cetera. So thank you. I know that's it's all hands on deck process. So thanks, Michelle. We have 2 LAC presentations to be scheduled. and that's the Lakewood Advisory Council. One is unsafe driving awareness. They've worked hard on that and are ready to make that presentation. And the other one is the Renewable Energy Mitigation Program. So although we've got pretty stuffed agendas for till the remainder of the year, we're going to try to get those scheduled for you. So the LAC will have a chance to present the work they've done on each of those topics. Several months ago, we had a long conversation about the Porchlight Family Justice Center. And just as we thought we were getting to the finish line, we were hoping that we'd be able to open it, or the county be able to open it mid-September. But there was a large water line break into the facility that's going to delay that opening, just when you think it can't get worse. So hopefully that'll only delay them a month, and we'll be able to open that in October. And we're not sure if it's going to be a in-person or a virtual opening, of course, based on the COVID-19 situation. And finally, a budget update. Staff has been working hard on trying to figure out how to make those adjustments to the 2020 budget as well as the 2021 budget. You'll get a full report next week, August 17th, by our CFO. And before that, there is a budget and audit board meeting scheduled for August 13th. So that's in 3 days. I believe that's Thursday. And so that'll give you a chance if you want to view, kind of preview a lot of the information that'll be presented at the council meeting. You're more than welcome. I'm sure Councilor Bita would invite all of you to attend the budget and audit board meeting. The more the merrier, the more opinions, the more perspectives we get, the better conversations that we have. We'll also be looking at potential fee increases, and you'll see the result of a lot of work that the finance department personnel did regarding revenue white papers. Some of them you're gonna really, I'm sure will get great support and you'll want us to move forward, and others you'll say, nope, not anything we're interested in pursuing. And all of those answers are right. We just want to make sure that you've had a chance to look at all of the options that are in front of you in terms of increased revenues, while we're also working at reducing the budget. So this will make better sense at the budget and audit board meeting on the 13th, and certainly at the city council meeting next week on August 17th. So with that went quicker than I thought. So maybe I have 2 seconds to say happy birthday to my mom. And with that, that concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Nicely done. All right, so that concludes item 5, which is the executive report. And I want to now go to the general business motion, which council's talked about this every other week, I think, since March. And that's the extension of the emergency declaration with continued check-ins by the city council moving forward. And again, we're in a position where we're still in that state of an emergency in the entire state of Colorado. And this will continue to move it forward for 2 weeks with another check-in. So Mayor Pro Tem, I'd ask for a motion, please.
Okay, let me unmute. I move to extend the declaration of disaster in the city of Lakewood, Colorado, resulting from the coronavirus/COVID-19 pandemic, pursuant to section 1.27 of the Lakewood Municipal Code, originally declared by proclamation of the Lakewood City Manager on March 17th, 2020, extended by majority vote of the City Council on multiple occasions, and by this motion extended again until August 24th, 2020, unless earlier extended or terminated by the City Council.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion, council? So please raise your hand. Do not see any hands up. Motion and second. I'll ask the clerk to please do a roll call vote.
Paul,
Aye.
Able,
Able.
Yes.
Vincent,
Yes.
Gutwein,
Yes.
Vito,
Yes.
Skilling,
Yes.
Springsteen,
No.
Franks,
Yes.
Johnson,
Yes.
LaBure,
Yes.
Harrison.
Yes.
The motion passes, 10 ayes, 1 nay.
Thank you. All right. So now this is the consent agenda. The use of the consent agenda has been made to expedite council action. It contains both resolutions and first reading ordinances. Resolutions are items of a routine nature. Members of the public will have an opportunity in a moment to comment on any of the proposed resolutions. First reading ordinances appear on the agenda only for the purpose of setting future public hearing dates and ordering the newspaper publication of the proposed ordinance. No public comments will be heard this evening on first reading ordinances. The public will have the opportunity to comment on the proposed ordinances during the scheduled public hearings on the dates set tonight by council. And of course, any council member may request an item on the consent agenda be removed for separate discussion and action under general business. Will the clerk please read the consent agenda into the record?
The consent agenda consists of items 6 through 8 inclusive. Item 6, Resolution 2020-25, appointing members to the Historic Preservation Commission. Item 7, Ordinance O-2020-22, concerning the refunding of a portion of certain outstanding certificates of participation, Series 2006A, and the financing of renovations to the Fox Hollow Golf Course irrigation system and an annually renewable lease purchase agreement between U.S. Bank National Association, solely in its capacity as trustee, and the city as lessee, approving the forms of certain related documents, ratifying action previously taken in connection therewith, authorizing a supplemental budget appropriation of up to $5,925,000, providing other matters relating thereto, and further declaring an emergency. Item 8, Ordinance O-2020-23, authorizing a supplemental appropriation to the 2020-2021 City of Lakewood Annual Head Start Grant in the amount of $96,669 in funds distributed by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Administration for Children and Families from Office of Head Start.
All right, thank you. I'll now open the public hearing on the consent agenda, and that would just be item 6, Resolution 2020-25, which is appointments to the Historic Preservation Committee. If you wish to speak, please hit *9. Madam Clerk, do we have anybody who wishes to speak on this resolution?
We do not, Mayor.
Okay. I will close this, and before I ask for a motion on the consent agenda, I will ask our screening committee chair if you'd like to say anything about our applicants tonight.
I certainly would. It was a difficult decision. We had so much talent. I think the entire Historic Preservation Brain Trust lives in Lakewood. The applicants were all outstanding, and it was difficult to winnow it down to 2, but because of the quality, those 2 are just amazing candidates and will do well by us. The Historic Preservation Committee conducts public hearings on applications for landmark designation and makes recommendations to City Council. They also conduct alteration certificate reviews and approve review applications for the relocation of designated historic structures. Tonight, we're adding Kelly Swansiger and Heather Peterson to the Historic Preservation Commission board, and I appreciate their volunteer commitments. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Mhm.
I believe we have Heather Peterson with her hand up that she's being appointed tonight. She might want to say something.
Please.
Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening. I just wanted to thank you for the consideration and nomination to the commission, and I look very much forward to serving.
Well, we're excited to have you, and normally we would give you a round of applause here in council chambers. And I'm speaking a little ahead of the vote here, considering we haven't voted, but I have a pretty good idea. I think we'll be okay. So thank you for that. Anybody else?
Is Ms. Swansiger with us?
I do not see her here.
Okay. I just checked for both, but thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Johnson, you have your hand up. Do you have a question about the consent agenda?
Thank you. I just think it might be helpful regarding item 7, regarding Fox Hollow. If we say that that is an enterprise zone and the money for that will not be coming from the general budget. Isn't that the case? I think that's helpful for people to know that.
Great. Yeah, we'll certainly have a full presentation on that at the next meeting. And that is an enterprise fund with funds utilized via the enterprise fund program. So Mayor Pro Tem, can I have a motion on the consent agenda, please?
You may. I move for the adoption of the resolution and order the ordinances introduced on first reading to be published in the Denver Post, with public hearings set for the date included in the ordinance, all of which are included in the consent agenda items introduced into the record by the city clerk.
Second.
Right, motion is second on the consent agenda. Any discussion? I do not see any hands up. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Paul?
Aye.
Able?
Aye.
Vincent?
Aye.
Gutwein?
Aye.
Vita?
Aye.
Skilling?
Aye.
Springsteen?
Aye.
Franks?
Aye.
Ramey? Oh, sorry. Johnson? LaBure?
Yes.
Harrison?
Yes.
Motion passes 11 ayes, 0 nays.
All right. Again, congratulations to our new representatives on the Historic Preservation Committee. So now we will move into a section of 3 resolutions, and one being item 9, which we will ask for continuance, and Ms. Hodson talked about that earlier in her report. So I will ask the clerk to please read item 9 into the record.
Item 9, continued resolution 2020-23, authorizing allocations for 533 Van Gordon Street, Lakewood, Colorado, 80228.
Mayor Pro Tem Skilling, can I get a motion on that to continue to August 24th, 2020?
I move for the continuation of resolution 2020-23 to a date certain of August 24th, 2020.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion, a second. Any discussion on this item? And again, this has been the second continuance, and there was a posting issue brought forward, and certainly so now there'll be more than adequate posting with the last couple weeks as well as the next 2 weeks. All right, seeing none, Madam Clerk, could you please read the roll?
Paul?
Aye.
Able? Aye. Vincent?
Aye.
Gutwein?
Aye.
Vita?
Aye.
Skilling?
Aye.
Springsteen?
Aye.
Franks?
Aye.
Johnson? Johnson?
Oops. Aye.
LaBure?
Yes.
Harrison?
Yes.
Motion passes 11 ayes, 0 nays.
All right, great. Will the clerk please read item 10 into the record?
Item 10, continued resolution 2020-24, amending the definition of blight as used in chapter 14.27 of the Lakewood Municipal Code concerning a building permit management system using allocations for new dwelling units and establishing rules and procedures for request to designate property as blighted.
All right, thank you for that. On my master script here, I do have that Mr. Smith is going to speak to this, or is he here just to answer any questions?
I think I can answer that. I believe he's here just to answer questions. The presentation was available on Lakewood Speaks, and we assume everyone had a chance to review it.
Okay, thank you for that, and welcome, Mr. Smith. I'll now open public comment on item 10, resolution 2020-24. And again, I will repeat, the call-in number is 956. Forgive me. The call-in number is 646-558-8656 with the webinar ID as 956-847-7277. Please press pound after entering that ID, and then *9 if you'd like to speak to resolution 2020-24. Madam Clerk?
Yes, we have a caller ending in 2434.
All right, good evening, caller 2434. If you give us your name and ward, I will get your 3 minutes started.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is Kathy Kentner. I live in Ward 1. And tonight I am addressing blight, the blighted properties in relation to 1427, the Strategic Growth Initiative. And in that ordinance, the intent is to encourage redevelopment of blighted and distressed properties. Allowing blight to be declared on property that has not been developed at least once destroys that purpose and intent. I would like to ask Council to please consider adding into your rules and procedures for requests to designate blight that it only be on properties that have been developed. And that way it follows the intent and purpose of redevelopment of blighted and distressed properties. And the other question that I have is, for how long will these blight designations be good? These are resolutions, and they are temporary in nature. This specifically refers to 14.27 and allocations, which are done annually. So I'm wondering if this will be an annual designation if a property is blighted, or for how long it will be blighted. And whether or not it will follow if the property is sold. Thank you very much for considering these items.
Thank you. Madam Clerk?
Caller ending in 8078.
All right, good evening, caller 8078. If you give us your name and address or ward, we'll start your time.
This is Mike Muller, Ward 4. And back in, I think it was October or September, I said we were talking about the blight. We would use blight to go around 200. And Mr. Mayor, you told me, no, we would never do that. That blight was going to stay in the enterprise zones just to work on that. Well, I think you're going to try and expand it a lot more than what you're saying. And we have given the allocations for the year. We have given the allocations for the next 2 years. And so you're getting around the number of apartments that we're allowing into our city by doing this. This has got to come to a stop, Mayor. You're pressing the issue, and it's not a good thing politically. And Mr. Skilling, once again, I went over your campaign flyer the last time. You said you were going to stop these apartments. Well, you're creating a situation where these apartments are going to sprout up like weeds again. Now we got one here on Gordon. We've got the Union Corridor apartment complexes that are coming up. Are you going to allow all of these under blight, or where else is next? Over on Jewel? Oh, how about White Fence Farm? How about that, Mr. Mayor? Stop it. You know what you're doing. You got paid off by the developers. It's time for you to stop. Thank you very much.
Madam Clerk, next.
No one else has indicated they wish to speak.
Okay. So I will wait a couple seconds here. Again, this is Resolution 2020-24, which is an amendment brought forth by Councilor Beta on a previous resolution, I think from either late last year or early this year. Anybody else, Madam Clerk?
No, there's not.
Okay, I will close public comment. And so I know that Councilor Johnson sent in a suggested amendment. Councilor, do you want to speak to that? And can, if you have language on that, and if there's other amendments, we can vote on those and then read the actual motion in.
I'd be happy to. I am introducing a friendly amendment. It's under section 5. And basically the sentence that reads, this Lakewood City Council will not designate a property as blighted under sections 2, 3, and 4 if it determines that a property owner has failed to reasonably keep their property safe, secure, sanitary, and good condition and repair, or who has otherwise failed to comply with the zoning requirements. I am asking that we take the word reasonably out. It is vague, and it would be much more clear and understandable if that word is deleted. Thank you.
So is there a second? Basically, it's one piece of language. It's the reasonably that is being asked to remove.
Second.
Okay. Motion and a second. Any discussion on that? Okay. Councilor Beta?
Yes, I would accept that as a friendly amendment, Mayor. I think that when I submitted this, I got a little carried away with the lawyer lingo, if you will. And in retrospect, I think using that word there is really it's a legal wiggle word that we really don't need. And I think it'll be more concise and more clear if that word were to be stricken. So I appreciate the suggestion, and I think it's right.
So point of clarification, Mr. Graham, being that that's a friendly amendment, do we need to vote on that? You're on mute.
Yeah, I just figured that out. That's a good question, Mr. Mayor. Typically in situations, this is a little odd because of the way that it's been drafted. But when it's really the person who's making the motion to adopt the resolution, that's the person who needs to approve or agree to the friendly amendment. I don't recall if we had a motion on this resolution yet.
No, we hadn't read it in yet. We're waiting to deal with the amendment, and then it could be presented as amended. So why don't we just take a vote? I guess it's easier.
That's the way I would go for now.
Okay. So there's a motion and a second. Councilors Harrison and Mayor Pro Tem Skilling, do you wish to speak to this motion? All right, Councilor Harrison.
My question was, without the word reasonably in there, we would just be using the code definitions of like the status of the property. In other words, how deep the weeds are and debris on the location and et cetera, et cetera. We wouldn't be trying to define reasonably, correct? I'm assuming, I see some heads bouncing up and down. I'm assuming that's what would determine if it was in. Is my audio going crazy again? People are smiling. No. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. Are you following my train of thought here? Okay.
Would you mind restating that, Karen?
I'm going to try. see if I can gather up a little bit better to this time. When we take the word reasonably out of this definition, as you're asking for, Ramey, does that make us go back to, and should we be just using our code in terms of what a property needs to look like? For example, the height of the weeds on a piece of property. Things like that would determine whether it is quote unquote blighted.
That's a good question, and I see no reason why we would not use what code is recommending.
That's
Right.
what I would think, and that gives us kind of more defined reasons to identify a property as blighted if it's in the code. If this follows and this follows and this follows, then that would give us definition for blight, correct?
Yes.
You and I agree, Ramey, but I don't see anybody else agreeing on this one. So, Greg, am I tracking correctly here?
Well, if I may, there are a number of criteria, not all of which are specifically identified in the municipal code. So safe, even secure. Sanitary has some. There's some language in the code under the nuisance provisions about sanitary, good condition and repair. So in a lot of ways, even by removing the word reasonable, it would be up to the city council to weigh what the city council believes all of these terms mean, all of these terms refer to, and then as a body, make the determination as to whether or not a property owner has in fact failed to keep their property safe, secure, sanitary, and in good condition and repair. I would agree with Mr. Bita about the word reasonably. We do that a lot.
You attorneys.
Yeah. So there's still room for interpretation, and it can seem a little subjective, but as a body, what you're doing is you're making what appears initially to be a subjective determination and becomes an objective determination. But to your specific question, there isn't a whole lot of language in the municipal code that addresses what safe is or what secure is or good condition and repair. Most of those terms aren't actually defined anywhere that I can recall. So.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so we have some more hands up. So this is to the actual motion of removing reasonable. So Mayor Pro Tem, your hand is up.
I was only going to say that I think we got off. It's not a friendly amendment. It would just be an amendment to the motion or to the resolution that's before us. And since we didn't make we haven't read that in as a formal motion, it would simply be a proposed amendment to what's in front of us. It wouldn't necessarily be a friendly amendment.
Right.
Just clarifying that.
Thanks, sir. Councilor Able?
I was a bit concerned when the phrase definition of blight came into that conversation. I think it would be it wouldn't be part of the definition of blight, but would be part of the determination of whether someone had properly cared for their property and therefore falls under the regulation or under the scope of this ordinance. Is that correct, Mr. Graham?
Yes, it doesn't amend or change the definition of blight. And I believe we all understand Mr. Bita's intent here is to make sure that folks aren't intentionally allowing their properties to go into disrepair so that they can get a blight designation.
Right. Thank you.
Yes, I would agree.
Councilor Springsteen to the motion.
Yeah, I had a couple thoughts that, blight was always meant for urban renewal areas only. And so it's a shame that we're having to deal with this expanded definition at all. but I think it's reasonable to take out the word reasonably, as that is so subject to interpretation. I do have concerns about how code enforcement handle this at all, but I prefer to take out the word reasonably. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay, so we have a motion and a second to remove the word reasonably. Madam Clerk, could you please take the vote?
Paul,
No.
Able, Able shows the up arrow, so aye. Vincent?
Yes.
Gutwein?
No.
Vita?
Yes.
Skilling?
Aye.
Springsteen?
Yes.
Franks?
Yes.
Johnson? Johnson? Yes. She indicated a yes. LaBure?
Yes.
Harrison?
Yes.
The motion passes 9 ayes, 2 nays. Nays being Mayor Paul and Councilor Gutwein.
Thank you. All right, Mayor Pro Tem, will you read the actual, make the motion for this item?
Sure. I move for the adoption of Resolution 2020-24 as amended.
Second.
Okay, motion and a second. Any discussion to the proposal as amended? Okay, I'm going to say one quick thing, and I appreciate Councilor Bita bringing this forward, and he's been quite patient in trying to bring this forward for some time, as he got this in prior to COVID, and so it is strung out. I just want to mention that personally, I am not in favor of this. I think we tried to keep with the state definition as much as we could, and that the fact that this is a resolution and any determination of blight under the original adoption comes to City Council, I see this as somewhat duplicative as well as not really binding. I think it's aspirational language, and I know we've tried to keep away from that because of things that have got us in trouble in the past. But again, I want to thank Councilor Bita for bringing that forward, and I will not be in support. Councilor Gutwein?
Thank you. I actually have just similar comments. I think that my understanding from our previous discussion is this doesn't actually add any additional power or tools to the council than we already had. And my concern would be a couple things. One is that it would give community members a kind of, well, it's the aspirational language issue that we've dealt with in the past, a kind of a false security or a false expectation. And then secondly, I think that, you know, intent of blight, I'm just having kind of a hard time understanding how we're going to prove that. Like, for example, are we going to be asking if there were mental or physical health challenges that prevented them from being able to take care of their property? That's from some blighted properties that we've dealt with in my neighborhood. So we already have this ability. I don't think that we need to add this in here. Thank you.
Councilor Bita.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to respond to those comments. I find it interesting that we're saying, well, this really is misleading the public and that it's powerless, doesn't have any effect. And when in a matter of fact, this is nothing more than a resolution that adds to or clarifies a previous resolution, which was 2020-7, and which goes through allowing blight, a designation of blight by council outside of the statutes, and which allows it especially for application regarding the Strategic Growth Initiative 200. So I didn't hear these same objections back then when we were considering 20-20-7 back in January. I think it was January 27th, if I'm not mistaken. And at that time, there was no objection to that. Everybody thought it was a great idea. Not everybody. I didn't think it was a great idea, but a lot of people thought it was a great idea to go ahead and put that resolution in. Now we're saying any addition to the resolution is meaningless, is toothless, and has no effect. If that's the case, then why don't we just say that with regard to 20-7 and do away with the whole thing? You can't have it both ways. And so I do think this has some guidance provides some guidance and clarity for council going forward when they do consider a blight determination for the purposes of exemption under 200. So I think this, and it may be at some point that we'll have to raise this to the level of an actual modification of the 200 ordinance. But I think this is a first step to at least get some clarification in place. And at some point we may have to go farther, but I think we're all somewhat, at least I'm somewhat reluctant to get into tinkering with the language of an ordinance that the people of Lakewood had passed. So I think we look at that as somewhat sacrosanct, and we don't want to tinker with that, but clarifications in the form of a resolution do make some sense. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Able?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. My concern is, as Mr. Beta mentioned, ordinance versus resolution. And as one of the public comments mentioned a few minutes ago, a resolution is a temporary measure and it can't be codified. The question raised a few minutes ago is, what would be the lifespan of a designation under a resolution for blight? Would it be something someone would have to deal with within a year, something that they would have to deal with before they dispose of the property? I believe the question went. I think those questions are fairly relevant to this conversation. And but I agree with Mr. Beta, sometime or another, we're going to have to review this as an ordinance so it can be codified.
Thank you. Thank you. Councilor Springsteen.
I just wanted to say I support what Councilor Beta said, and also just wanted to remind council of the vote we had on 200 and that we have to support the will of the people. It's always important to remember that. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor LaBure.
Yeah, I guess I would just add, based on some of the other comments, in my view, I think there are a lot of flaws and holes and lack of definitions in the original ordinance, and that's the reason we're in this predicament again today. I believe our staff recommended making some ordinance changes, and I think as a council, the council voted no on that and didn't support that because they thought it was changing the will of the people law. So I was supportive of making some ordinance changes then, but unfortunately, we've gone the path we have, and I think we'll continue to have to tinker with it at some point. But I think it sounds like temporary measures might be the order for the day. So thanks.
Okay. Again, we have a motion and a second. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Paul?
Aye.
Able? Able?
Aye, but I'm still waiting for an answer to my question about the longevity of this resolution.
Madam Clerk, please continue with the roll.
Vincent,
Aye.
Gutwein,
No.
Vito,
Aye.
Skilling,
Aye.
Springsteen,
Aye.
Franks,
Yes.
Johnson. She's holding up her yes arrow. LaBure,
No.
Harrison.
Yes.
And Madam Clerk, just to clarify, I was a no vote, not an aye. I was a no.
Thank you.
Mhm.
The motion passes 11 ayes, 3 nays, nays being Mayor Paul, Councilor Gutwein, and Councilor LaBure.
Just a quick correction, 8 ayes, 3 nays.
Oh, what'd I say? I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. We're still getting through this.
We had a bigger council.
So, Mr. Graham, do you want to circle back to the longevity of the resolution?
Sure. Actually, in 2020-7, the resolution you're amending, Section 4 actually says that any designation of blight made for purposes of and in accordance with procedures set forth in 3125-103, but not located in an urban renewal area, shall expire at the conclusion of a period of time as determined by the city council upon its determination of blight. So what that's saying is you decide how long it lasts. Mr. Able is correct that that resolutions are not permanent, and just as we're amending 2020-7 now, it could be amended again later. But until something is acted on, and in this case, well, let me go back. Until something is acted on that changes something that's decided in a resolution, it stands. But Section 4 of 2020-7 says City Council decides how long the period of time is that property will be determined to be blighted. And at the end of that period, it's no longer blighted, and they would have to come back to City Council for redesignation.
Thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem Skilling, your hand is up.
Yeah, so quickly then, Mr. Graham, does that mean that when we are voting on whether to designate a property blighted, that part of what we need to do as our findings is how long the property shall carry with it that designation for purposes of 14.27?
Based on this resolution 2020-7, that is correct. You would have to make that part of your findings or part of your determination.
So let's not forget that then when we make those findings subsequent to this resolution.
I'm not sure I'll be able to remind you because who knows when I'll be here again.
Well, ironically, I think item 11, we do have that opportunity right now.
Ironically.
So,
if I may, Mayor, I don't want to be out of order, but the resolution would be what designates the 1427 blight finding per property, and inside that resolution is a determination of time for that property. Now, that may or may not be correct as council would like it to be, but we have a section in the proposed resolution this evening that talks about the timing of that process.
Thank you.
You bet.
All right. Will the clerk please read item 11?
Item 11, Resolution 2020-26, approving a Chapter 14.27 blight designation for the property located at 1347 Lamar Street.
Okay. So do we have, Mr. Smith, is there a presentation on this? I know that you discussed it last week.
Yes, we discussed it last week, and there is a presentation. Both the consultant and the property owners are available in the waiting area of this Zoom meeting to talk about that. The plan was generally for me to introduce the consultant, let them do the presentation of the elements of the blight study or the condition survey that's before you this evening, and then I would do the quick introduction of the resolution that's before you regarding that designation.
Great. Why don't we go ahead and move forward with that? And then once that is done, we'll open the public hearing and have public comment and then move into council.
Sounds great. Well, good evening once again, Mayor and members of City Council. Thank you so much for taking some time on your agenda for the consideration of this matter and the resolution number 2020-26. It's concerning a chapter 1427 blight designation request for the property on 1347 LaBure Street. We do have the property owners, as I mentioned. We'll have the consultant, the property owner's consultant, run through the main points of the blight study in a moment. And so you know, Matrix, who has conducted this study, is one of the best in the metro area. In fact, they were the consultants that did the original urban renewal area on West Colfax. So very familiar with the urban renewal process, and had an opportunity to hear from them a little bit last week on the generalities of the process. Lakewood's 1427 blight process is nearly identical to the urban renewal blight process. There are a few differences, as we were able to run through those last week in the study session. And so the condition survey and blight study is included in your packet, along with the staff report. I'll bring to your attention a couple of things on the staff report, because that's what we will use a kind of a consistent format for the staff report for all of these that may come forward in the future. And one is a section in the middle, a table that runs through all of the questions. Those questions are determined by Resolution 2020-7, kind of the defining of the process. And so this is a staff report to let you know whether the applicant and their consultant have gone through all of these steps. And so I'll read them real quick here. Was the conditions survey, or what's known as the blight study, kind of a near synonym there, conducted by an independent consultant for the subject property or properties, with such survey being commissioned at the property owner's expense? Answer to that question is yes. Was the conditions survey conducted in strict alignment with the criteria and methodology required for the state statute of determination for a blighted area? Answer to that question is yes. Were the property owners informed the condition survey report will need to be scheduled for and presented to City Council at a public hearing by the property owners and their independent consultant? The answer is yes. Were the property owners informed upon presentation of the conditions survey report that City Council could determine whether sufficient conditions of blight consistent with the state urban renewal law exist, and to designate the property as blighted for the purposes of 1427? The answer to that question is yes. Were the property owners informed such designation of blight would occur by City Council resolution and would only apply to implementing Chapter 1427 for the subject properties, and it would not be construed as a blight designation for the purposes of urban renewal? It wouldn't be an urban renewal property. And the answer to that question is yes. Were the property owners informed Council 1427 blight determination would sunset in a defined number of years? The answer to that question is yes. And were the property owners informed Council's 1427 blight determination would not change the tax collection nor change the ability to use the power of eminent domain? And the answer to that question is yes as well. So one more on this list. Were the property owners informed the properties with a 1427 blight determination would not be under the Lakewood Reinvestment Authority's oversight? And the answer to that question is yes. This would be strictly under the City Council's oversight, not the Urban Renewal Authorities. The report that you have in front of you, the one that the consultant will be running through here, has 6 of the 11 defined blighting elements on the property. And you'll, of course, will run through all of those and let you know how those are present on the property. I will also mention that this study area, 1347 LaBure, is located less than 500 feet from the existing West Colfax Avenue corridor reinvestment area. So the existing URA boundary is directly north of the property, just across 14th Avenue. This property is near the W line light rail. And while we don't want any of our properties to be blighted in the city of Lakewood, we definitely don't want the properties near the light rail to be blighted. So we want to encourage redevelopment and development on these properties so that they are not blighted. It's also along the 40 West Art Line. It's an amenity the city's invested in quite a bit. We also want those properties to see redevelopment and investment very quickly. This area is in the Colorado Enterprise Zone, which is part of a state program to determine areas where greater need for investment or inducement of investment is needed. So the state, through their enterprise zone program, has determined this property is in need of additional efforts to redevelop the property. It's also in a federal opportunity zone, which essentially does that same sort of thing on the federal level. The federal folks have identified this as a property that probably needs some additional inducement to get investment. The council determined that 4 of the blight factors of the 11 need to be present on any property seeking a 1427 blight designation. Now, under urban renewal, if a property owner wants to voluntarily bring their property into an urban renewal area, they can do so with just one condition of blight. Council was specific in that they wanted 4. This one that you would consider tonight has 6, so we're well above the minimum 4 level that's on there. So wanted to point that out as well. It doesn't change the zoning or grant any additional entitlements if you are to find a 1427 blight designation on this. The properties will still need to abide by the established historical zoning and the comprehensive plan. I did review the Lakewood Speaks website tonight. There were no comments that need to be addressed this evening on that on this issue. Just wanted to make sure you were aware of that. And with that, I'd like to introduce, let you know that our applicants are once again in the room, and that our senior project manager for Matrix is here. They'll quickly run through the contents of the condition survey, the blight study report. I'll come back to wrap that up, and then we'll be able to address any questions you may have at that time. So the property owners, Paul Stan and Don Hackstaff, are here. They're developers and property owners, 40 plus years of experience at the local level. They brought substantial investment to several communities in the Front Range, including in Lakewood with previous projects. And then I'll note that the Matrix Design Group is nationally recognized, the entrepreneur in entrepreneurial planning, engineering, and environmental consulting. They, as I mentioned, did the 2005 Colfax reinvestment condition survey for the urban renewal area along West Colfax. And tonight we have their senior project manager, Mr. Chad Coker from Matrix Design. He's been with that organization for about 15 years now, so it looks like he's going to stick and stay around at Matrix for a while. And he's a hydrologist by training. So without further ado, I'd like to bring Mr. Chad Coker to the fore and let him go over the highlights of the condition survey for this property at 1347 Lamar.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Good evening, Mr. Coker. Welcome.
Good evening, everybody. Thanks again for your time. Before I start on the presentation, I just wanted to address 2 comments. One from last week that I didn't, after I thought about it, I didn't think got explained well enough, and one from tonight. The first one was from last week. Councilman Able asked about blight companies and consultants like myself and having 100% blight designations in our reports. And I did answer honestly that yes, we do pretty much have 100%. Now, having said that, I probably need to explain why that is. Just for instance, in the past, probably 18 months ago, I was hired by the city of Aurora to do a blight study along one of the corridors, the light rail corridors. And they started out with a drawing of the boundaries that they wanted for that corridor. So what we do first is we kind of do a pre-assessment of the corridor. And I did basically tell them that the area that they had highlighted and outlined would not qualify for blight. So what happens is we don't do a report for that, or we try to find a way to increase the area of the corridor to include maybe future development so that you would get enough properties within that area and within that corridor to designate blight. So that is how we do have 100% blight. It's not like somebody says, can you please assign a blight for us? And I do it just because they paid me to do it, because the Colorado urban law is pretty, it lays out exactly how you have to do a blight study. So that's from last week. From this week, Council Member Springsteen made a very good point that blight studies typically are urban renewal development areas that include many, many properties. And I'd say 98% of the ones I've done are large areas like that. Having said that, I know that Mr. Smith did indicate that this property itself was within 500 feet of an urban renewal study area, and just by a fluke of the way the boundaries were drawn was not included. Had it been included, make no mistake, this property would have been one of the properties that triggered the blight designation for that entire area. And just because it's on its own does not change that at all. So I can go into the presentation now, but as the Colorado Urban Statute clearly states, and that's what we'll go over now, this property does tick 6 of those blight boxes. So do you want me, I'll go ahead and share my screen to do the presentation?
Please.
Okay, so I know you guys are all familiar with the area. It is, if you look on this map, this part up here, the lines, that is where the initial blight study is. That's how close to this study area that initial West Colfax Avenue corridor reinvestment area blight is. So if they had just dropped down and included this study area and even the industrial areas in the red, it would have been a no-brainer that this particular study area would have been one of the properties that ticked the boxes that did indicate blight for the entire area. As it is on its own, it still is able to click off 6 of those boxes.
Mr. Coker, can you go full screen on that?
Yes, absolutely. Let me get that.
Might be easier for folks here and those tuning in.
Okay. Anybody that's better with this, can you guys help me?
No.
Is that it? There we go.
There you go. Perfect.
Okay. I know we don't need to talk about the 1% growth cap because you guys are the ones that came up with that. This is basically the urban renewal statutes, and you can read through this. It just basically talks about what you guys have been talking about for the last hour, that blight is a minimum of 1 if no objections by the owner or tenant, 4 if it's just a standard blight study, or 5 if there's acquisition by eminent domain. I know that the city of Lakewood has chosen 4 for their number for this particular statute. So these are the 11 factors of blight as listed in the Colorado Urban Renewal Statutes. And again, you guys can go through these. I know we went through these last week. If we want to just go through this particular property, these are the 6 that we determined had factors of blight within these 6 listed blight factors. The first one is predominance of defective or inadequate street layout. That was pretty simple. There's no sidewalks, there's no street cuts, there's no access to this property at all. It is basically a vacant property with no streets, with no curb cuts, with no access. Having said that, the church next door and people in the neighborhood very obviously still use this area for a turnaround. And so they are tracking mud onto the streets and into the parking lot. It's undefined, the roadway is, there's no curb or gutter that's unpaved, it's rutted, and there's no point of access. So that is pretty much an inadequate street layout. And that's also, that's historic. That's not something that the property owner allowed to happen. That has been there, ever since, I went back in history. That's what the history of this property is. The next one's faulty lot layout in relation to size, adequacy, accessibility, or usefulness. Again, we talked last week that a lot of times these go hand in hand, these B and C. And again, this is accessibility and usefulness of this property. There's no use for this property unless it gets developed. This is basically just a vacant lot that has no use unless a developer or somebody came in and actually spent a lot of money to put in all of the necessities for accessibility and usefulness. And the main issue for this study area, as discussed and as I said, is a lack of accessibility to the property from Lamar Street and an unconventional, unsupported access from the church just north of there. The next one, the blight factor that came, was unsanitary or unsafe conditions. Homelessness is considered unsanitary, unsafe. Gang graffiti could mean unsafe. You can see here a crime density map that shows that it's in a higher crime area. And this is a 2020 year-to-date crime density map. But the more important thing, there's two important things on this unsanitary, unsafe. And that would be, number one, there are no stormwater provisions in this at all. There's no storms, there's no designated curb and gutter, there's no storm sewer system, and there's no sidewalks for people to walk. And because this is so close to the light rail, this is a heavily traveled pedestrian road with no sidewalks. So unsanitary, unsafe is definitely clicks the box on that. Deterioration of site or other improvements. That just basically is saying that there is no landscaping, there is no maintenance. It's just an empty lot with, like I said, people accessing it from the church parking lot, from LaMar Street itself. It's rutted. It's just basically a dirt lot in the middle of a bunch of development. Unusual topography or inadequate public improvements or utilities. Obviously, there are no public improvements. Like I said, there's no storms, there's no stormwater, there's no utilities, and it's obviously not got, it's got great topography, but it definitely does not have public improvements or utilities. No curb and gutter, no sidewalks again. And then there are some potentially developmentally prohibitive overhead utilities that would likely need to be moved or put underground in order to develop this facility. That's another hindrance to development. And that's also why it's considered blight. And then the last one is kind of the catch-all. It's the existence of health, safety, or welfare factors requiring high levels of municipal services or substantial physical underutilization or vacancy of sites, buildings, or other improvements. So this one is basically the fact that you've got an empty lot 2 blocks from an RTD station and 2 blocks from the Colfax corridor that has never been developed. So that is substantial physical underutilization of a site in an area of development. And and those are basically the factors of blight that are considered blighted for this property. Now, having said that, I know that the discussion tonight centers around development of this property. However, the only thing that I have is this blight or is this not blight? Whether or not you want this developed for any reason other than for whatever reason, tonight all I'm answering questions about is the applicability of a blight designation for this property. Any questions?
So, Mr. Coker, I think we're going to go through the full presentation, if that's okay, and then have public comment, and then we can go back to questions.
Okay. I'm sorry about that.
No, that's okay.
That's all I had on the presentation itself. Those were the 6 factors of blight that were identified for this particular property.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Smith, is it back to you, or would you like me to go to public comment?
You come back to me for just a moment. You have a resolution before you. That's 2020-26 once again. That resolution, if you were to vote in favor of it or approve that resolution, it would grant a 1427 blight designation to this property at 1347 LaMar Street. If you were to vote against this proposal, it would not designate that 1427 blight designation there. With that, I will conclude the presentation that the staff and the consultants have for you. And with that, staff is happy to answer any questions. And as I mentioned, once again, the owner and the consultants are also available for questions as we move forward.
Great. Thank you. I'll now open the public comment portion. Point of clarification, actually, Madam Clerk, did you read this into the record? I believe you did.
Yes, I did.
Okay, so I'll now open the public comment portion on resolution 2020-26. Madam Clerk, do we have anybody in line?
We do not.
Okay, so I'll just wait another second or two.
We do now.
Okay.
Caller ending in 2434.
Caller 2434, if you please give us your name and ward, I'll start your 3 minutes.
Hi, this is Kathy Kettner in Ward 1. I wanted to reiterate the one point that this is only about 1427. This is about city council giving up its right to a public hearing and the public's right to have a say in the development of this property. It is not ensuring the development will happen. And blighting this property in particular will not fulfill the intent of the ordinance, which is to encourage redevelopment of blighted and distressed properties rather than initial development of property. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Okay, Madam Clerk.
We do not have any more hands raised.
Okay. I will close public comment on resolution 2020-26, and I'll go to Councilor Vincent.
Hi, yes. I hope what we do tonight, I think last time we talked about this, it got into a full discussion of blight. And I acknowledge that maybe we need to go back and review and do some different things with the ordinance. But tonight, I'd just like to focus on this property. I am in favor of this. For those of you, I don't think anybody went and perused this place. It has been vacant for, I walk by it all the time, for at least probably 24 years. There's already been 3 people who have sold it, who've attempted to do something with it and couldn't. And I guess 2, I'd like to thank the property owner for finally cleaning up the property. The weeds have been horrible. The homeless have been horrible. It has been a mess there for a long time. But what I'm really concerned about is the safety factor. This neighborhood was told forever that once that light rail got built, things would be taken care of from the light rail to Colfax. We'd have lights, we'd have sidewalks, there'd be development. And this is the first person that I know of in that area that's willing to put the money out there. I've had a lot of phone calls this weekend, and I've had to try to explain this to folks because they wanted to know why the developer did not come and talk to them. I said, they can't do a development. It hasn't gone through planning commission until they get this blight designation because that will impact what's there. Currently, they're looking at 20 for-sale townhomes in this area as opposed to the apartment buildings they can build. It is blighted. There's a church next to it. It was former industrial area. So I do support it, and I know that a lot of people around there support this building too. That said, I know that there's some people who just say, no, never, ever should we ever do anything to build there. But not all sections of the city are the same. I'm not talking about Van Gordon. I'm not talking about anything. I'm talking about a poorly laid out, graffiti-ridden property that needs love, that needs something. And we finally have somebody who's willing to do that. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Springsteen, then Councilor LaBure.
Well, you know, I think that says it all when we say this is the first person willing to put money into it. That's what this is really about. This is a way around 200. This is a bad precedent to set. This is vacant land that can be developed eventually, but it is not what was intended. This is an unintended consequence of going around 200. Mr. Coker said that he finds almost 100% of the properties he looks at blighted. And Councilor Able said that that would concern him last week. And yet there's no explanation that I could see as to why that's okay, that we have a consultant here who finds everything blighted. And so let me look at Mr. Coker's LinkedIn. He's a program manager, environmental lead for major asset redevelopment at numerous sites around the country, including Stapleton, former Fort McPherson, former Pueblo Chemical Depot, Federal Center, Stanley Aviation. I mean, what are we doing here? 100% is blighted. Where in Lakewood do we have sidewalks? I don't have sidewalks on my street. That's part of the reason I moved to Lakewood. I wanted a country feel to where I was living. We don't have sidewalks. That's not a definition of blight. So no use, okay. This is not supposed to apply to vacant land in Lakewood. And okay, homelessness. Well, we have issues with homelessness in many places. That does not mean we just allow people to get around our allocations just because there's a piece of vacant land. There is access to this land on all sides from the picture I could see. Another indication of blight was no public improvements or utilities. Well, on what piece of vacant land do we have that situation? That describes all empty lots in Lakewood. I am just asking this council to not make precedents where we are just disregarding the will of the people and 200 over and over and over again. We should not be doing this.
Thank you. Councilor LaBure.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, I think a little bit in line with what Councilor Vincent said. I don't think we're going to convince any one of us to change our perspectives on blight or 200 or, anything that we already have a sense of how we view. I don't think we're going to change anybody's minds here today. So I think it would make sense to put this in the scope of this actual property, and I'd be happy just to do an up and down vote and move on. But just want to add a little bit of commentary real quick, try to be brief. I think on 200, I do feel comfortable that we are doing what the will of the people wanted in this case if we did blight this property. The second bullet on the purpose and intent of the vote on 200 did say that we want to encourage development in blighted and distressed areas. To the extent that we're talking about, well, no, what we really meant was new development shouldn't be included in that. It's just redevelopment. If that's true, then we probably shouldn't have an exemption for the entire urban renewal area, because there are a lot of areas within the urban renewal boundaries that are not redevelopment. They're also just new development, or would be, or could be. Yet we had some of the same people suggest that we should have all the urban renewal area as the definition of blight, even though it's not an ordinance. The original ordinance just said blighted generally, which was a much more expansive version. We narrowed that by going with urban renewal. And so I think it fits within what a lot of people have already told us, which they're fine with developing an urban renewal or urban renewal area specifically, but also blighted generally. And that's also why the argument was made to go with the state definition of blighted, was because that was in line with what urban renewal has to go through, the same similar process. But I just want to mention that, I don't know, I don't think this will sway anybody, but it is at least for the voters and the residents who are listening. I knocked 10,000 doors when I ran for office, and I asked every single one of those people what their thoughts are on development. And I'll tell you, it's true. A lot of them did say, we don't want to have overdevelopment. But I guarantee you just as many said, but we'd like to see some changes on Colfax. And, this is a block off Colfax. I drive down this property. I see this property twice a day minimum because I drive right by it. I live a block from here. And I don't think you're going to find any residents who actually live around here who drive by this property call in today and say, let's not do something with that, because for a long time there have been people living there. There's been grass that's been grown. There's been trash that's been there. Heck, not too long ago, a bunch of neighbors decided to turn it into a junkyard, and they brought a bunch of abandoned cars in there. I don't know what was going on, but the property owner, who lives in Two Creeks, who lives in our neighborhood, by the way, he got those cars. They parked about 6-7 cars there. This was just a couple weeks ago. None of them ran. All of them were smashed. They had to tow them. I was watching some cars drag them into the lot, and the property owner was kind enough to take care of that and get it cleaned up for us. I know we've had quite a few calls there in the past. So, I think Councilor Vincent already mentioned this, but this entire block is blighted. In fact, this entire block was going to be developed into a commercial, residential, mixed use area. It was going to have restaurants, coffee shops, apartments, and some home ownership opportunities. Unfortunately, the people backed out of this area because sort of the political, consternation and developments that were happening in the past year. This is an opportunity potentially to get some of that back. And this is market rate. Sure, there's no guarantees it'll be market rate or home ownership, but I know the person who's doing it. I take him at his word. And if it's not, I still don't think that this would be a unwelcome project in the community because of all the other reasons I've already mentioned. But market rate home ownership opportunities in this part of town and this part of the neighborhood are far and few between. So I think that would be a welcome. I think that'd be a welcome development. And I think that's a similar reason why we also did a rezoning on 13th there just a couple of years ago for the same reasons. I think I'll just leave it there, but I just wanted to kind of give some context for someone who lives right here, sees this every day, and has heard a wide range of perspectives on blight and development in the neighborhood. Thanks.
Thank you. So I have Councilor Gutwein, Able, Beta, Johnson, and Harrison.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. And then also thank you for the comments from the two counselors that represent this area and know it the best, better, this is their neighborhood. And I want to take into consideration what they said about really looking at this property and considering this property tonight. So I want to first just make some comments on that. It was mentioned this is already state designated area needed for investment. It's already federal and state. It's a block away from the URA. And I think, I do appreciate the concern about consultants that we had in our last discussion. However, these are our neighborhoods. We're not talking about some outer space place that none of us have ever been. This is our neighborhoods. We know the areas that are blighted. We know the areas that are struggling. And so if we were relying on someone that we were getting, paying to tell us what it looked like, and we couldn't see it ourselves, then I feel like maybe it would be a little bit more difficult. But this is an area that we have neighbors writing in and telling us. We received emails from community members, highlighting some of the issues that are happening in Ward 2 and specifically with this property. It's in Sharon and Jacob's neighborhood. We know it's blighted. And I think that in terms of question 200, I agree that we absolutely, we have to follow this. This was passed. Not by Ward 2, I will just say. But it was passed, and it does say encourage redevelopment of blighted and distressed areas. That's number 2. And it says blighted and distressed, not just blighted. It doesn't say URA. It does not say only this does not include vacant land. None of that is in here. It just says redevelopment of blighted and distressed areas and land that's designated blighted. And again, like Jacob, I have had one-on-one conversations with, I have knocked between all these different elections, over 10,000 doors, probably over 15,000 doors. There are mixed opinions on development, but two common things we hear, one is don't want overdevelopment. Another is, man, Colfax could use some help. And that, development along the light rail, especially when we're talking about possibility of for sale buildings there. I fully believe this is within the language of question 200. And then the last comment I'm going to make is just a general comment that I feel frustrated and sad, and like we are not doing our community the work that we should be doing for our community when we are continuing to have conversations about growth as if we are not in an economic recession. We are, and those businesses are struggling. This is likely to continue to get worse. And I feel that we have a responsibility to look to the future and, make sure that people have an opportunity to buy a house. And if we continue to close off every opportunity, I just feel like that we are going to make it harder and harder for people, anyone in my generation and younger, to buy a home and to live the American dream here in Lakewood, especially in the middle of all of everything else that's going on. So I ask you to please consider what is going on in Lakewood, in this area, in Ward 2, in Colfax, not Ward 4, not Ward 3, it's in Ward 2. And the businesses that are around there, the benefits to our community, what this property has looked like. And this is not a slippery slope precedent setting issue. This is a case by case basis, and it checks all the boxes. So I will be supporting this. I ask you to please consider the impacts on our businesses and our community when you make this vote. Thank you.
Councilor Able.
Thank you. I agree. This lot screams out to be developed. It does. However, we're talking about, go look at the lot. Maybe one time it was blighted, had all the cars on it. It's been cleaned off. At one time it was wilderness. You got to go a long way back to get there, but at one time, this was wilderness. So what I have to do is look at what's presented to me. And I'll start out with improper street layout. It's not accessible. We're told it's not accessible. And yet we're also told, oh yeah, everybody that's leaving the property next door or wants to turn around off Lamar Street finds it easily accessible. The fact that it has no driveway, no sidewalks, no curb and gutter, that's what developers do. We require them to put in driveways, sidewalks, curbs, and gutters. So the lack of it is just an undeveloped property, not blight. We're told that the utilities are worthless. and that the property has topographical problems. But when you look on the assessor's website, they have to weigh these things in order to establish a property value. The assessor's website says all public utilities are available. And while I'm on that, I have overhead utilities in my front yard. Most of the city has overhead utilities, most of Colfax. Most places, some places don't even have utilities, such as the Rooney Valley. So the utilities are there. The utilities are entirely adequate. If the developer doesn't like the way they look and wants to underground them or put up prettier poles or whatever, that's for the developer to do. That's not a condition of blight. The assessor also says it has good street frontage, a collector street frontage with a 30-mile-an-hour minimum speed and minimal traffic. It also has a level to slight slope. That's not a topography problem. That's what most developers are looking for when they go look at a property. They don't want to do a lot of grading. The vacant lot, I mean, it's vacant lot is not on a one lot property is not a condition of blight. It is simply that one property is vacant. In the larger context like Colfax, vacancies are important. On a larger, and that's homeless issues. Those are addressed in the larger area. That's why that's part of the blight foundation of our state law. Graffiti, Sharon, Ms. Vincent mentioned graffiti. There's no graffiti on this property. The graffiti illustrated in Matrix's assessment of the blight doesn't exist on this property. And they said it's right on the property line. It is not. It's set back from the west property line on the property of some folks in, I believe, duplexes or fourplexes behind it. This property is not unsanitary. I've been on the property. I saw nothing unsanitary there. It may have been at one time. And I feel badly that the property owner has removed what could have been blight conditions, perhaps, but they left the property unblighted. Now, as I said, this screams out for development, and we're told it will be 20 town homes. That's great. However, the blight designation would be a value added to this property. You know, we some time back agreed to allow some townhomes over at 1650 Garrison. Townhomes never came. Now it's been rezoned and with a wide array of uses, and the price of the property has trebled within 2 years of us approving it. So what I see here is a method by which this property could change hands on the basis that, oh, now it's exempt from 200. It screams out to be developed. It could be developed under 200 very easily, but this is not a blight survey. It's blight allegations. There's no firm foundation under any of them. They cite the lack of development. In fact, Ms. Gutwein read from the ordinance when Mr. LaBure had said it says that we need to cure blighted and assure development. It's redevelopment, as Ms. Gutwein put it. And this, having never been developed, it can't be redeveloped. And if I'm not mistaken, some years ago, State Representative Lois Tocktroff introduced legislation that removed from the possibility of blight under state law properties that were vacant and had never been developed. So I cannot, in good conscience, I can't endorse a blight designation for this. But then again, in good conscience, I would hate to see this thing not be developed. But we have to do the factual finding. And you can't ignore the facts. This property is not blighted. And a lot of the allegations raised by the folks from Matrix are things that are supposed to be taken care of by developers, such as sidewalks, driveways, and curb and gutter, and sanitation, and bringing those safe, providing a connection to the existing utilities with new development. So I can't in any way support this as a blighted spot. Thank you.
Let's see, Councilor Beta, and then I have Johnson, and then looks like we can go back to another round. I have some stuff, and then Councilor Springsteen.
Thank you, Mayor. Not to prolong this, I echo the concerns and comments of Councilor Able. I think he's addressed this the way it needs to be addressed. And we can talk about all the different ramifications and everything about this, but that's not the issue. The issue is, does this meet the definition of blight? With all due respect to the presenters, as we've said, they're advocates for the homeowner, or the property owner. They're certainly not consultants, neutral consultants presenting a balanced view on this thing. They're trying to present an advocated position here. I don't find what they have presented persuasive in the least for many of the things that Councilman Able said. And then just add to that, they talk about it's blighted because there's no landscaping, and then they show a couple of pictures of some weeds in the corner. Well, it's undeveloped. Take a lot. Of course, it's not landscaped. I don't see how that constitutes blight. And I just add that to some of the other things, the access, the graffiti. I mean, it's just, I'm sorry, it's almost laughable to show pictures of a small shed on another piece of property that has a little bit of graffiti on it and say, well, that's the reason for this is blighted, because there's a graffiti on somebody else's shed. And, for that matter, why hasn't that graffiti been removed? Like I said before, my mom had graffiti on her fence and she was told she had to remove it in 3 days, or the city would do it for her and send her the bill. Why hasn't this been removed? Why hasn't the same ordinance been applied here? And then they have a pile of clothes in the corner of the property. I've been there. I looked at the property. That clothes would fit in about one black trash bag. And that's a reason for designating this blight? I don't think so. So the presentation, with all due respect, it's just not persuasive, and I'll be voting no on this. Thank you.
Councilor Johnson.
Thank you. Well, I would like to echo Councilor Beta and Councilor Able as well. And I'd kind of like to go down some of these conditions of what was considered to be blight. I went over there personally, and when I looked at it, I thought, this is vacant land, and this isn't blighted. We all know blight when we see it. It's kind of like pornography. You know it when you see it. So I came home, I got Walt, and I took him over there, and we sat there and looked at it. I would have to agree. The reasons for giving 6 conditions of blight just don't feel the bill. The first one, unsanitary conditions. Actually, when we went over there was enough trash to put in a very tiny bag. There really wasn't anything. Deterioration of site. There's a few weeds. If somebody is really interested in keeping homeless off, you can always put a fence around your property. Unusual topography. This is flat. If they can put 2 large buildings with 10 units of townhomes on each one, the topography really isn't that unusual. And there was one condition that was talking about underutilization. This is vacant land. And then there was faulty lot layout. Well, it's rectangular. I don't get that. You know, if it was irregular all the way around, that would make more sense. That is not very persuasive. It was mentioned that there is no use unless it is developed. And that's true. To be honest with you, this is screaming to be developed over there. And I hope that the owner will go ahead and go forth with it. A predominance of defective or inadequate street layout. Actually, that's kind of silly, to be honest with you. When we went over there, you can drive right into it. It's not like you're going into a ditch. And the developer would be held to do the street or the sidewalks and gutters. Plus, I'd like to say directly to the south and adjacent, those folks don't have sidewalks and gutters either. So that doesn't even make sense to me. I would have to agree it does not meet the definition of blight. And I would also like to agree with Councillor Springsteen. We are being put in a position where we are going to use the definition of blight, and all of us know this is to circumvent 200. You know, in some ways, I don't honestly understand it. They're wanting to put up townhomes that are only 20. It's not that 40 threshold. They could still go about doing that. There's something there that I don't understand. I would hope that they would go forward with the development. I do have a question. If it is blighted, how does that change the taxes on this piece of property? And also, we all know that when a developer goes through with this and the schematic that has been shown to us of the townhomes, there is no designation for parking. And really, we need to look at the full picture of where this is going to go. Plus, there was not any data regarding crime and the police department, how many times they've actually had to come to that. The reality is, was there ever a school assessment done? We're not doing this in a vacuum, and everything needs to be taken into context. But to say that it is blighted, I personally think it's laughable, and I will be voting no. Thank you.
Councillor Springsteen, then Councillor Harrison.
Hi there. So I grew up on the corner of Colfax and Sheridan, pretty much. I know that area of Colfax. I know what is blighted because I spent many, many years there. A piece of vacant property is not blighted. In fact, open space is kind of nice, isn't it? And I bought a piece of property across from some open space that was eventually developed into a commercial building in a residential neighborhood. And guess what? That was not very pleasant, and it still isn't 8 years later. And so the idea that every piece of open space has to be developed or it's blighted is ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. I'll tell you what else is ridiculous. that we think as a city council, we know better than the voters. Well, there's things I don't necessarily agree with the vote on. But guess what? I'm still going to go with what the voters tell me to do because they're my constituents. And so maybe we didn't like how the vote went on 200. And we think there should be more housing in Lakewood. And we think we know better than the voters. Well, guess what? Our opinion doesn't matter. What matters is what the voters told us to do. And they told us to control development in Lakewood. And that is what I'm going to do. I'm going to go with what my constituents told me to do, whether I agree or not. But I think a piece of vacant land is not blighted. It's ready for development someday when we have the allocations available.
Councilor Harrison?
Thank you. A couple of different points that I wanted to make. First of all, if someone could look this up, I'd love to know how many allocations we actually have left for 2020. Are they all gone or do we have some? Well, I ask a couple of, I think they're all gone, aren't they? No. Okay, so Dave's saying no. That's what I was thinking. We still had some allocations left. So that's number one comment. Number two comment is I just want to correct a misunderstanding about property rights and open space. Not every single blank or vacant piece of land is open space, and it is not our right as citizens to tell that person who owns that property what they can and can't do. It's wonderful that, you know, there are some places that can be open space or parks, and that's exactly what the city has attempted to do. But it's also our job to protect those property rights that a property owner has. And when they're filing according to the rights and the zoning ordinances and whatnot, then they have the right to develop. And as exactly what's happening here, they're going by, you know, trying to find out if it was a blight definition. That's up to this council to decide that. But if it doesn't go as blight, I'm hoping that they will come back and apply simply as townhomes, because that's probably exactly where our development needs to take place, close to light rail. That's the purple zone when you think about that. But it's important for people listening to this, and in opposition to what Councillor Springsteen just said, not every piece of vacant land is open space. That owner bought that piece of property and has held it for a long time to be able to develop it or sell it or whatever, according to the market situation. It's not the neighbor's rights to tell that property owner what they can do and what they can't do. When they bought it, it came with rights. So it's important for us to understand and respect, I think most of us do, that when a piece of property is purchased, it comes with a specific set of rights and zoning that it can do. As long as that owner proceeds under that zoning, they can do things. So vacant land is not open space. It's important for us to know that. Thank you.
Thank you. So a couple things, I just want to stress. One, certainly this is not a zoning request before us. So whether they can do what they can do on this property no matter what. And so that's important to note. And that's not what's being debated here. And it looks like, you know, the definitions, whether we like them or not, you know, are part of CRS 31-25-101. And so that was what was presented tonight by this consultant. And I appreciate the consultant's recommendation. I appreciate how he followed up with Councilor Able and said, hey, you know, there actually was one, and there's times when you do it and it just doesn't exist. And we look at other opportunities. That's their job. You don't hire a health inspector to come and tell you how to design your fire suppression system in your house, right? You hire a blight expert to come in and look at it and say, this applies or this doesn't apply. I would rather have a third party do that than somebody within the city being responsible for that and how that could turn in a dime. I'd also like to point out, when you look at our urban renewal areas, there's vacant land all throughout those areas. And in fact, we're 500 feet from that Colfax urban renewal area, and there's a bunch of vacant properties that are sitting right over there. So while it may look to the naked eye that it's just what it is, you know, look at the Rocky Mountain Arsenal, look at Rocky Flats. There's a lot of examples of just land that are terribly, terribly blighted and have different things that could apply. I'm not saying that this is the case here, but it was former industrial, and who knows when they open the ground, what could actually be there also. I have had the opportunity to spend a lot of time in this corridor for a long time. And a snapshot to say I drove by and we looked at it, it looked fine. Well, go on any other given day, and, you know, just about a block away is probably the highest crime, highest call volume area of our whole entire city, where I think last year we registered multiple murders, sexual assaults, all kinds of different things, as well as a continuation and a constant addressing by our CAT team of homelessness throughout the corridor, which encompasses this property as well. I'm not sure if you took the time to walk on it. It is private property, but there's needles everywhere. So health and safety, did anybody notice the needles that were on the ground? So, I mean, we can get into those kind of semantics, but at the end of the day, it's 500 feet away, and it's a property that has somebody that wants to do a development next to a light rail. And I am certainly in full support of this. Building on the west side of Sheridan is a lot different than building on the east side. Although the cost of construction is the same, the east side is going to always yield you more money than it is on the west side. And so these things that can help bring in new development, I think, makes sense. And believe it or not, you've heard the community, you've seen emails from the community, and they're in support of this, and that goes a long way. I didn't see one community member from within 2 creeks reach out and say that they are opposed to this, nor did the organization. So I'll certainly be supporting. Mayor Pro Tem Skilling.
Thank you. So I just had a couple questions. So I'm told that it's the 20 for sale townhouses. Seems like a fairly small piece of property. So I'm not sure if you would ever really create large, I don't think anyone's saying it's going to be a huge apartment building complex by any means. But the questions I had was in the resolution on section 2, it has the designation is going to be as long as, or the duration will be for until there's a completed redevelopment. Okay, is it this redevelopment, or is it redevelopments that happen in the future? Is it on a continuum? Does this just go around like a hamster on a wheel? I don't know. Or 20 years. So that's our durations. The completed redevelopment seems like a phrase that we may want to look at as far as in the actual resolution itself. And also listening to others talk, this doesn't seem to be a circumventing of 200 in the sense that it's 20 for sale townhomes. And we have, as I recall from Mr. Parker's memo in late July, somebody please correct me, but I thought it was 190 something or 190 open pool allocations exist right now.
I believe there's 192, just to be specific, 192.
So there's 192. I don't know. I mean, this project certainly isn't asking for 300 or 200 or 100 or 50 or 20, or actually it is 20. So that's, I guess I'm wondering, and I don't know if anyone can answer it, why they're even attempting a blight designation on this property. This doesn't seem to fit. And I'm asking that without no other judgments attached to it, just genuinely curious with a project this small, with so many allocations available. The blight designation does not get around any of the normal building procedures as far as neighborhood meetings. Once you do build, you still have to go through all of those processes.
Mr. Skilling, I could probably help with that, but obviously we have some people, Mr. Coker, who might be able to answer that better, but I might be able to shed a little light on that.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I'm trying to figure, this doesn't seem to me that this is any kind of circumventing of anything. If we have the allocations there, more than enough allocations, and they don't get a free pass to do anything that they wouldn't normally have to do as far as the planning commission and all of those things, or not planning commission, but as far as doing the application for the building permits, they still have to go through all that. They have to meet their zoning. So I guess those are just my questions. I had the questions about the language in the resolution as to completed redevelopment, those two words, and then a question either by, I guess, Mr. LaBure or the property owner or consultants as to why, if this is such a small project, are we doing a blight designation in the first place?
So I'll certainly defer to Mr. Coker or Mr. Stan if they want to address.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So what exactly do you want me to address about that? I'm sorry.
So the question was, with allocations available, and what is actually the need then to go forward with the blighted designation if there's allocations available?
So I think Paul might have to answer that. For me, it's just, is this a blight designation or is this not a blight designation? I don't go into the development part of that, so I'll have to defer to Paul on that.
Okay. Mr. Stan?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Good evening.
Good evening. Well, thanks for talking with us this evening. I think we looked at this, I think we started this process back in January or March when we first tried to look at the piece of land. And I don't think at that time the allocations were available. And I think only recently, you have to correct me if I'm wrong, Robert, only recently did some become available because of all the projects dropping out. Am I not correct in that, Robert?
I'm sorry, Mr. Stan, I don't know the answer to whether the allocations became available or didn't become available. I just don't know that information. That would be something for our planning folks, and unfortunately they're not in the mix. Maybe someone else has it.
Okay.
Miss Hodson's raising her hand. I don't know if she wants to weigh in on that.
Yes, thank you. I would like to invite our planning director to the conversation who can help with more detail about the allocations and the timing thereof. So I believe Travis Parker is on deck somewhere because of item that's coming later in the evening. There he is. Yeah, Travis, can you help provide some clarification to the questions that Mayor Pro Tem Skilling brought up? Thank you.
Sure. It really comes down to the way that the allocation system works in 1427. So the system is designed so that projects go through their entire planning process. They go through a lot of their building permit process, and then they apply for and can get allocations after all this work is done and all this investment has taken place. And the issue that arises is, for a project like the one in front of you that still would have to do all that work, they're not going to be applying for this year's allocations. They would potentially be applying for allocations at some point next year. And the issue is that projects with more than a few units require outside financing. And that outside financing doesn't accept the risk of maybe allocations will be available next year. And so the vast majority of conversations that we have with developers since 1427 has come in has been, how do we get certainty at the beginning of the process? Is there a way to get our allocations at the beginning? Is there a way to, to take advantage of any of the other language, lights out, or everything else, to get the certainty we need that when we invest millions of dollars to do these plans and get these building plans drawn up and get these site plans drawn up and approved, that we'll be able to actually build the project.
Mayor Pro Tem, do you have any follow-up?
I don't, other than if Mr. LaBure had anything to add. You seem to have something on that, but that's it.
What I was going to say was just in line with what our planning director said. This is a small, relatively small type of development on a relatively awkward property in a not super desirable area. And it's pretty low margin. So I think the fear was if you don't have sort of the full entitlements, there's, significant risk that this won't be a project that could pencil out. So thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Parker. Mr. Able?
You could make that argument about just about any vacant property in town or any project that's going on. Are we going to follow the community's mandate and enact and follow the provisions of Initiative 200? Or are we going? Yeah. And the other thing is, what really bothers me about this is there's no blight there. There may have been at one time. There's none there now. If this can be declared blighted, so can the entire Rooney Valley. It has even less access to utilities. There are no roads on the property save for one in the bankrupt Mount Carbon area. 20 allocations aren't that difficult to get. It's a very small number. We have a lot left over this year, and I would say they could probably bank what they could draw this year and use them next year. That's the way 200 works. But again, it's for redevelopment, not development. And I don't want to ignore the facts of the condition of this lot in order to circumvent 200. All the developer has to do is work with us and work within the realm of 200, and he can get 20 allocations very easily. But if we're going to wait until everything pencils out, if we're going to deal with the financing questions and that sort of thing, we'll be dealing with them on every development that comes along. So, is this the first of 1,000 cuts that'll lead to the death of 200? Is this the first of 1,000 possibilities that we can just declare blighted and ignore all the provisions of 200? There is no ignoring the fact that a lot of folks who endorse this blight designation fought tooth and nail to defeat 200, both before it went to the ballot, after it went to the ballot, and as we were codifying it. So, folks, let's observe 200. This property can be developed easily within its bounds. So, if he needs allocations before he gets financing, we can bank those allocations for him. I'd love to see this place developed, but I would also like to see us keep our bond with the voters who told us what they wanted for the city, the whole city, not just 2 or 3 wards. Thank you.
Councilor Gutwein, and then I'll ask Mayor Pro Tem for a motion.
Thank you. Just a couple of closing thoughts. Again, reading 200, it says encourage redevelopment. It doesn't even just say allow, it says encourage redevelopment of blighted and distressed areas. And I disagree that if we say this area, which is within a reinvestment zone, that's been declared by federal and state as an area that needs investment, that's right next to a URA, that's on Colfax. That's nothing like Rooney Valley. It's nothing like Rooney Valley. Rooney Valley is next to some of the most expensive homes in this city. It's next to $1 million homes. So, you know, I can see your point regarding it's undeveloped. But those two things are completely different. And I don't think that anyone up here is going to look at Rooney Valley and say, wow, that's a blighted area. Certainly not the members of Ward 4. Certainly not the neighborhood in Ward 4. They're not going to say that. What we have here is you have to look at the whole context. And then just one other thing that's kind of bothering me about this conversation is we're saying we can't look at the history of this property. We have to look at how it looks like today. And today the owner cleaned it up, which, by the way, thank you for that. But then about an hour ago, we were having a conversation saying, you know, we have to look at, like, basically, if you clean up your property, we won't call it blighted, even if it's been blighted for 24 years. Also, though, if you don't clean up your property, we're going to say you did that intentionally to not get, so that you can get a blight definition. So just feels a little bit ridiculous. I think, you know, this is a blighted property. 200 says encourage redevelopment of blighted. Again, it does not say redevelopment means of vacant properties, or it does not include vacant properties. It also doesn't say ask Charley Able and Kathy Kentner what all the undefined words mean. We have a document, we all voted on it. It says redevelopment of blighted and distressed areas. We voted as a council on what the definition of blight means. Now we have a council saying, wow, this definition's awfully ridiculous. So that just feels very unproductive. We voted, we agreed on the state statute. That's what the definition is. That's all. Thank you.
Councilor Vincent, are you going to try to call the question? I see your hand is up, or do you want to speak to that? Because I was going to ask Mayor Pro Tem Skilling for a motion. So is that okay? Okay, Mayor Pro Tem, can I get a motion, please?
I move for the adoption of Resolution 2020-26.
Second.
Okay. There's a motion and a second. Is there any discussion, especially pertaining to the 20-year? Is that something that you want to address, Mayor Pro Tem? Your hand is up again.
Well, I did ask the question, and maybe it's too late to do it. Maybe this isn't the right timing to do it, but I still, you know, it says completed redevelopment, and then it has the 20 years. We've heard some of the concerns were, you know, is this going to stay in the same ownership? Could this be somehow used to do something else with the property? So maybe 20 years is a bit too much. And when it says completed redevelopment, I'm wondering if we couldn't put in something like completed redevelopment by this property owner. Would that kind of assuage? Because, you know, Councilor LaBure talked about the word of the developer. Maybe we're always concerned as a council that these people come and say, well, I didn't mean that these developers or landowners say it's going to be 20 for-sale townhouses. Maybe this is the way to kind of do that. If we say completed redevelopment by the current property owner, and certainly 20 years is far too long. My only other comment, just generally speaking, I think reasonable people can look at all of these blight factors. We've heard the presentation today. We've all had the packet. Reasonable people can certainly disagree on whether or not this property meets those factors. I would disagree with some of my colleagues to say that this doesn't come anywhere close. I think that this, certainly you can make arguments on the factors that we've heard tonight. So I think that it's a reasonable discussion to have, but I would like to figure out the parts I just mentioned in section 2, maybe before we vote on the motion.
Okay. So we have a motion. I know Councilor LaBure might want to address that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm happy to either make a motion, Skilling, or if you have your own language you'd like to use, I say go for it. That makes a lot of sense about limiting the scope.
Point of order, Mayor.
Yes, sir.
It would seem we should put the main motion to a vote. If it passes and we declare the property blighted, then we deal with this question. If it fails, there's no use to deal with this question. So my suggestion would be, let's go ahead with the up or down vote. And if we fail to, if we declare it blighted, then we address the length of the term.
Okay, well, thank you for that. I would say that in all of our practice, we vote on any amendments to the main motion first. So if there are no amendments to the main motion, then we would do an up or down vote.
Thank you.
Yep. Mayor Pro Tem Skilling, your hand went up.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that I would make a formal amendment to the resolution to add after the words completed redevelopment in section 2 to include 4 more words by current property owner. And I would also reduce the duration of time to 5 years rather than 20. Those would be either a single motion or 2 motions, but that would be my amendment to add those 2 clarifiers to section 2.
I can second that.
Okay, so we have a motion and a second on an amendment. Does anybody need any more clarification on that amendment?
Yeah, can you clarify again for me? I'm sorry.
That's okay.
In Mayor, may I?
Please.
In section 2 of the actual resolution, and I'm going to it now. I've got all these screens. The section 2 talks about the duration of being 20 years. It says the blight, section 2 reads, the blight designation shall expire upon either the property's completed redevelopment, and in that, right after that, I would say by the current property owner. That would be part of the amendment. And then it goes on to read, or 20 years from the date of this resolution, whichever occurs first. And the second part of the proposed amendment would reduce 20 years to 5 years.
Any more questions? Okay. Madam Clerk, please take the vote.
Paul,
Aye.
Able,
Aye.
Vincent,
Yes. Aye.
Gutwein,
Yes.
Rita,
Aye.
Skilling,
Aye.
Springsteen,
Aye.
Franks,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye, but I just want to make sure we are voting on adding the language regarding the current owner and reducing the time from 20 years to 5 years, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, okay, aye.
LaBure,
Yes.
Harrison.
Yes.
The motion passes 11 ayes, 0 nays.
All right, so are there any other amendments? Seeing none, Mayor Pro Tem, will you make the motion as amended?
Do I need to withdraw the previous, or can I read it in, do I need to withdraw the motion?
No, just reread. I move to adopt 2026 as amended.
I move for the adoption of resolution 2020-26 as amended.
Second.
Motion and second. Any further discussion? Madam Clerk?
Paul,
Aye.
Able,
No.
Vincent,
Yes.
Gutwein,
Yes.
Vita,
No.
Gilling,
Aye.
Springsteen,
No.
Franks,
No.
Johnson,
No.
LaBure,
Yes.
Harrison.
Yes.
The motion passes 6 ayes, 5 nays, nays being Able, Vita, Springsteen, Franks, and Johnson.
Thank you. Will the clerk please read item 12 into the record?
Item 12, ordinance O-2020-19, vacating a portion of right-of-way for West Yale Avenue, southwest corner of Red Rocks Business Drive and West Yale Avenue, further located to the southeast of Lot 7, Block 3 of the Red Rocks Business Park filing number 1, as depicted in Exhibit A to this ordinance.
Okay, so thank you for reading that in. Counselor Able, do you have a agenda question? Or?
I'll raise my hand, but does public comment first or?
Well, yeah, we read it in, then we have a presentation, then I open public comment.
Okay, so I'll withhold my comment until after the public comments.
Okay, thank you. So thank you, Madam Clerk. Ms. Hodson, I show that we have Ms. Mueller and Mr. Wattell. Are they here for questions or are they going to give a presentation?
I don't believe there's a presentation. I think they're here to answer questions.
Okay. So with that, then I will now open the public hearing and open public comment on ordinance 2020-19. Madam Clerk. It's funny, we actually do hear crickets.
Mm-hmm. I do not show anyone with their hands up, but I was under the impression that there may be a brief presentation. Is that correct, Ms. Miller?
In the meantime, Ben, is there a mix-up here? Ben?
It was my understanding that the presentation was not changed from what was already posted on Lakewood Speaks. I think that's the case.
Thank you. So as I had said earlier, the expectation was that people have already viewed the presentation. So if there are any questions that follow from that, that's why we have staff here to for the conversation that comes out of the presentation.
Thank you. I think that's correct as well.
Madam Clerk, anybody?
No one has raised their hand.
Okay, I will now close public comment on 2020-19. Questions or comments? Counselor Able, you.
Yes, thank you. And those are my crickets. I told them to hold the chirping down to 3 minutes apiece, but they can pull their time. Is this vacant? Is this necessary due to the allocations that were to weigh for the 533 Van Garden? Is this connected with that case?
No, this vacation case is for a small
portion of existing right-of-way out at West Hill Avenue at the intersection of Red Rocks Business Park.
Mhm.
And this is in the valley, so between the Cardell property and the CDN, just to the west of the intersection that exists of South McIntyre Street and West. Yeah,
Oh, okay, thank you.
you're welcome.
Any other questions? All right, Mayor Pro Tem, can I have a motion, please?
I move for the adoption of ordinance O-2020-19 on second and final reading.
Second.
Okay, motion and second. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none, Madam Clerk.
Paul,
Aye.
Able,
Aye.
Vincent,
Aye.
Gutwein,
Aye.
Vita,
Aye.
Skilling,
Aye.
Springsteen,
Aye.
Franks,
Aye.
Johnson,
Aye.
LaBure,
Aye.
Harrison.
Aye.
Motion passes 11 ayes, 0 nays.
Thank you very much. Madam Clerk, while you're at it, will you jump down one to the next, please?
Item 13, ordinance O-2020-20, disconnecting certain property addressed as 3053 South Bruni Road, a parcel of land being a portion of the southeast corner of Section 26, Township 4 South, Range 70 West of the 6th Principal Meridian, County of Jefferson, State of Colorado.
Okay, I'll now open the public hearing. And Mr. Parker, do you have a presentation?
Not personally, but Ms. Mueller does.
Okay. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Kara Mueller. I'm with Planning and Development Assistance. And just to kind of shorten it, I think this goes back to the fact that the presentations are unchanged from Lakewood Speaks as well for this disconnection. It is located generally at 3053 South Rooney Road. It is an approximately 7.53 acre parcel of land. It is located in unincorporated Jefferson County. It's in the city of Lakewood, and they are looking to bring it into unincorporated Jefferson County. Back in the 1970s, the 3 parcels of land that make up this proposed piece of property for the disconnection were annexed into the city of Lakewood in the 1970s. In the 1980s, C470 was developed, and it kind of bisected these 3 parcels away from the larger city boundary. And so right now, the remaining property owned by the applicant is within unincorporated Jefferson County, and they're looking to disconnect these 3 parcels and have all of the property that they own that's west of C470 within unincorporated Jefferson County. And staff does support it.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. Madam Clerk, do we have anybody sign up to speak?
We do not.
Okay. We'll just wait a quick second. Anybody?
No.
I'll close public comment on ordinance 2020-20. And I'm gonna go with questions. Councilor Able.
Thank you, Mayor. I seem to remember that our Rooney Valley Master Plan, the document I'm not really fond of, but was approved by all of council, is designed to discourage anything but annexations. The plan says that we should, how does it put it, encourage annexation into either the city or the town. It would seem to me then that de-annexation would be something that would run afoul of the recommendations of the plan. As I said, I'm not fond of that plan anyway, but is that the case, Ms. Mueller, that the plan does call for encouragement?
Thank you, Mr. Able, for the question. Yes, the existing intergovernmental agreement between the town of Morrison and city of Lakewood does speak to the fact that the first right of annexation in the valley would be to the town of Morrison. Subsequent would be to the city versus unincorporated. Given that C470 bisected a few parcels off, it just seems much more reasonable and that this would go to unincorporated Jefferson County. Any of the properties currently that may be intertwined within city property, because at this time, Red Rocks Ranch was actually disconnected from the town of Morrison. That went into unincorporated Jefferson County. That's left a few parcels. There may still be a portion of that intergovernmental agreement that still does exist. That may say that the city of Lakewood would be looked at first because it's no longer contiguous to the town of Morrison on the east side of C470. But along the western side, it seems fair and more reasonable that these parcels are only contiguous to unincorporated Jefferson County, owned by the same property owners on all sides. The town of Morrison also was a referral on this and they had no comments on it. It seemed reasonable to them as well that this would go to unincorporated.
Thank you. And just one other thing, that's pricey ground out there. We're talking 7 acres or more. What is the property tax hit that we will take?
That I'm not the best to respond to as far as taxes go. It is a very linear piece of property. I think at this time it's mostly used for just overparking of RVs at the northern end where the largest part of what I lovingly call the knife. That's kind of the shape that these 3 parcels form. But the tax question I'm not the best for, and I don't know if there's someone better suited maybe on the applicant's team. I'm not sure how we asked that question with this Zoom.
Yeah, it's a little bit challenging. I think if they're the applicant, I think there are some folks on. If they're prepared to answer that, that'd be great. If not, I certainly can understand that. And I would also mention that we have some different unique areas all throughout kind of this corridor, even like the entrance of Bear Creek Lake Park, which I think is not in the city of Lakewood, is in actual Morrison. So we have these little one-offs in that area, and it does look like a knife. So.
Mm-hmm. And we are working with municipalities, unincorporated as well as the town, to eventually clean up some of those boundary areas. But at this time, we've set that aside, where it's just the cities and the towns where we may have to pay for any kind of surveying or anything like that.
Okay, I'm not hearing. Can
you hear me?
Yes.
Hello, I'll introduce myself. This is Ethan Wattell with Baseline Corporation, 112 North Ruby Drive, Suite 210, Golden. Good to see you all again. I'm here on behalf of Rooney Road LLC. Councilman Able, I did hear the question. I'm not prepared to have an exact answer on what the amount of property tax is, the current assessed value of that property, and then how much would go to Lakewood. I apologize. I don't have that offhand. It is 3 parcels. One of them is a little larger at 6 acres, and then there's a 0.15 acre parcel and a, give me one sec, 0.61 acre parcel. But yes, all combined, it's 7.53. As Kara said, they're very narrow. They're on the kind of the western embankment of C470 there. I'm not sure exactly how the county assesses them. I do apologize, but they are part of the larger Vandermeer Speedway parcel, or site, I should say, which is 151 acres approximately. And the Speedway does have several properties in Morrison as well, but those are intended to stay in Morrison. This is really just a regulatory simplicity for the Speedway to not have pieces of property that are actually zoned residential be in split jurisdictions. And it's sort of a cleanup process for them. But I can get the answer to your question, just not right this second.
Well, it is not a huge part of our income. Property tax is not, but when you're talking ground that's 100 grand an acre, it could be a few bucks in our checking account, and we certainly need every dollar we can get these days. So, but I'm not going to be voting against it because of that. So, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mayor Pro Tem, can you read a motion, please?
I move for the adoption of ordinance O-2020-20 on second and final reading.
Second.
Motion and second. Any discussion? Okay, seeing none. Madam Clerk?
Paul,
Aye.
Able,
Aye.
Vincent,
Aye.
Gutwein,
Aye.
Beta,
Aye.
Skilling,
Nay.
pardon me?
Nay.
Thank you. Springsteen,
Nay.
Franks,
No.
Johnson? Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. LaBure,
No.
Harrison?
Yes.
The motion passes 7 ayes, 4 nays, nays being Skilling, Springsteen, Franks, and LaBure.
The clerk, please read item 14. Oh, Madam Clerk, you are on mute.
Thank you. Item 14, ordinance O-2020-21 for the conveyance of a sewer line easement to West Alameda Heights Sanitation Service, Inc. across a portion of Cottage Park.
Great, thank you. I'll now open the public hearing. Is there any public comment?
No one has raised their hand.
Okay, seeing none, I will close public comment. Mayor Pro Tem, could I have a motion?
I move for the adoption of ordinance O-2020-21 on second and final reading.
Second.
Okay, there's a motion and a second. Any discussion? Seeing none, Madam Clerk?
Paul,
Aye.
Able? Able?
Aye.
Vincent?
Aye.
Gutwein?
Aye.
Beta?
Aye.
Skilling?
Aye.
Springsteen?
Aye.
Franks?
Aye.
Johnson?
Aye.
LaBure?
Aye.
Harrison?
Aye.
The motion passes 11 ayes, 0 nays.
All right. Well, I want to thank, we had a lot of staff on board tonight, as well as a lot of folks who were part of these different items. So thank you for all your work tonight. That was actually quite a lot of work tonight for this council. So thank you. General business, anything under general business? Okay, seeing none, go to reports. And I'll go 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So we'll start with Ward 5.
No report.
Ms. Harrison, there you are. No report. Okay. Ward 4. No report. Okay. Ward 3.
No report here.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to give my ongoing report on trying to ban the use of ketamine in Colorado. There was a meeting of the Emergency Medical Practice Advisory Council today. The ASA and CSA weighed in against the use of ketamine. The waivers were generally extended again, although public radio and Fox 31 covered this, and we're generally concerned about those waivers. And we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of Elijah McClain's death here on August 23rd. And so I seriously have concerns about the city of Lakewood on this issue, and the human and civil rights violations that are going on. I think it's stunning. I think that we need to protect the city of Lakewood and the Lakewood Police Department from the kind of fallout that Aurora has faced. Nobody in the city will respond except me. Nobody will comment on it, and that's really something else to me. But at any rate, I also wanted to congratulate Councilor Skilling on last week's meeting, because it was such a refreshing experience to have such a civil meeting without any kind of harassment, and everybody was allowed to speak, and it was excellent. So thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Ward 2.
Yes, on top of this, I'd like to thank the police department. Many of you may know we had a shooting in the street with a dog, and it really, really traumatized the neighbors. It was right in front of an assisted living facility, and the neighbors, everybody over here was pretty shook up. And they treated everybody with a great deal of respect. Between that and this motion for the property blight, it was spent a lot of time this weekend on the phone. Also, we will have our Ward 2 meeting. We will have somebody from CAT. We don't have a name yet, and that is on Wednesday. It'll be from 6 to 7:30. So we'll have a report out on some of these issues that are happening in Ward 2. That's it.
Yep. And I could just add real quick, looking forward to a long week of meetings, budget and audits, Dr. Cog, North Lakewood Advocates, Two Creeks, and our Ward 2 meeting. So we're looking forward to having all those conversations and hearing all of your input. So see you then.
Ward 1.
Charlie?
I have no report. Thank you. Oh, no, there is one thing I'd like to mention, that we have a number of our Ward 1 residents who are helping clean up the city for various reasons and various motivations. One fella just hauled a toilet and a bunch of trash out of a creek over near Bondview. And we appreciate so much that folks are getting out and doing on their own what maybe we should be doing. So thank you.
I would just like to say, we are living during a time of a lot of uncertainty, concern, and fear. And however it works for you, however you go about seeking a higher power and a higher authority, let us all just pray for one another, for our city and our country, that people have more peace and hope. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we're running out of time on the census, and folks that are either uncertain about the safety of that, or don't feel safe, or are hard to reach, I really would encourage council, if you know those folks, if you know outreach organizations, to really get out there and see if we can get a complete count as much as we can. I think it's going to start wrapping up real soon, so the self-reporting time is over, I think. But this is really important for the city of Lakewood, and unfortunately, it's in some ways been politicized. So we need to make sure that everybody is counted, no matter who you are. We need to make sure that you're counted, and also need to make sure you know that that is safe, 100% safe out there. August 24th, as you can see, we are going to be loaded up that night. So I would really encourage you to take the time to dig in to your packets, to get questions answered. Ms. Hodson and her team are certainly always available, and we really do push these out a lot earlier than we had in the past to make sure that council has plenty of time to reach out and review. If you have amendments of things that you want to look at, please, that's another thing. You can get working on those, and we can be ready to have a productive and efficient meeting. This format is a little bit more challenging in some ways, and it's my goal to be respectful of all of your time, as well as the community's time, and certainly the city of Lakewood's time. So please keep that in mind. Excited to hear the second round of those nonprofit things are going out, but you are hearing, the local CARES dollars. Are those going to start to flow back again through the federal government? I think it's CARES 3, CARES 4. That's really important, as well as the fact of just being cognizant of evictions, and what we're going to see is those are going to probably skyrocket, as well as those investments that are going to start to tail off. So it is a time of great angst and uncertainty as we move forward, and the best thing we can do is work together. And then a shout out to Ms. Hodson and her team, the Lakewood Police Department. They continue to have incredible wins on the CAT team, and just everywhere that those folks are out. I've received some just incredible emails from the community about the police department and their help, and how they've really been just great leaders. And there were 2 folks in particular that our CAT team was just able to get off the street. And I think if any of you were over in the Ward 2 area touring around, you probably recognize them or might have known them for years, a husband and wife team, and they are now have a safe roof over their head. And so that is months worth of work. And as soon as that happens, there's probably 2, 3, 4, 5 more that take their place. And so I think it is important. And maybe we can look at ways when people in the community ask, what can I do to help? You're starting to notice the camps. You're starting to notice the trash. You're starting to notice a lot of that. And I don't think we can just look to the city to say, you need to do something. What can we do as a community to be engaged and to try to make some difference there? So that's all that I have. We will see you either at a couple meetings later on this week, especially the budget and audit, certainly next Monday for budget and audit, which will be full of a lot of information about our future. And that's it. So I will turn it over to Ms. Millard. Do you have anything? Just keep counting signatures. Mr. Graham, anything from the attorney's side? I don't even think you're here. There you are. Ms. Hodson, anything else?
No, did I say happy birthday to my mom?
You did.
I'm just kidding.
Hopefully she's still watching. So happy birthday. And we will adjourn this meeting at about 9:45 p.m. Thank you.